video we are going to be doing a prediction preview today for the biggest game of the 24-25 football season. It's finally here, the Champions League final. It is the final game of the season in Europe. And it's a big one, Paris Saint-Germain versus Inter Milan on Saturday night. So I'm going to give a full in-depth prediction and preview. In this video I'm going to talk about some of the sort of paths to victory, the strengths and weaknesses for each team, where I think they can cause the other team some issues. And then I'm going to go into some of the key matchups and key players who could decide this tie. And then I will give my full final score prediction at the end. Let me know in the comments below your score predictions, because I'll be fascinated to see what they are, as I genuinely do believe this is a 50-50 tie, and I think it's one of the most evenly contested Champions League finals we're going to see in a long time. I personally, I haven't been as excited for a Champions League final, besides the Chelsea one, since like Bayern Munich versus PSG in lockdown. I think these two teams are absolutely fantastic, but I think this is the first time in quite a few seasons now where we have two teams who I think are just as good as each other, and I really can't separate them. Because you see, like last year, you had Real Madrid, Dortmund. Obviously it's a final, so it ends up being 50-50 anyway, but Real Madrid were clearly the better side. Manchester City versus Inter, same thing. But I think this are two very evenly matched sides, and probably the two best teams in the Champions League this season. They have both proven it by beating some very credible and formidable opposition, so it's going to be absolute banger. Let me know your predictions in the comments below, but let's get into it then. So the first thing I really want to bring up is I think we've actually got a final here of two of the best counter-attacking teams in Europe, which is going to be very interesting, and I'm very intrigued to see what happens. Now, Inter Milan, we all know how deadly they are on the counter-attack. I mean, against Barcelona in that crazy tie, probably like 4 of the 7 goals they scored were from sort of fast breaks, counter-attacks. Now granted, a lot of that was Barcelona's high line getting exposed, but a large portion of that is Inter Milan's fantastic work on the counter-attack, with players like Lautaro and Thuram running in behind, their ability to win the ball back, their hold-up play, their dribbling, and then their technical midfield of Hakan, Mkhitaryan and Barella, who can pick out the pass, and then the wing-backs flying forward on the counter-attack as well. Inter are very, very dangerous when you give them space, and they didn't just do that to Barca, they also did it to Bayern Munich too, particularly in the away leg at the Allianz. I remember both of their goals were just absolutely sensational counter-attacking goals from Vertesi and Lautaro Martinez. Really well worked. They cut through Bayern Munich on the break, so Inter Milan are going to be very dangerous in this final if you give them space. But PSG as well, when you give them space, are deadly too, and they have proven it. For example, in the Aston Villa tie in the second leg, I know they ended up losing the game, but both of their goals came from cutting Villa open on the counter-attack. And against Arsenal as well in the first leg, their goal, Ousmane Dembele's goal, came from a counter-attack. Against Liverpool, their goal came from a counter-attack from Ousmane Dembele. And it is because of their electric front three. I think Dembele, Kvara, Barkla, Doué, they're just so direct, they're so fast, they're such good dribblers that you give them time and space and they're going to absolutely rip you up. They're going to rip you to shreds. And like Inter, they have the midfield to find those passes for the runners. And that's what I think makes this really interesting final, because you got two teams who are amazing on the counter-attack, but you actually have two teams who can do it both. They can counter-attack very effectively, but they are also amazing at just breaking down low blocks in general, right? PSG, for 90% of their games, come up against slow blocks, and they've been electric in breaking those down with their attack. And same thing for Inter. They come up against low blocks a lot, and they can score goals. So both teams have plenty of goals, right? And both teams have proven it across their Champions League campaign that they can score a bunch of goals. Obviously, Inter scored 7 in their tie against Barca, but PSG scored 3 against Arsenal, 5 against PSG, Villa, 10 against Brest. Inter scored 4 against Bayern, 4 against Feyenoord. So both teams have goals in them. Now, the interesting thing is, I think PSG's attack is probably a bit better than Inter's, but I do think Inter's defence is better than PSG's by quite some margin. Now, that might seem a bit crazy because Inter, of course, conceded 6 goals over the course of 2 legs against Barca, but actually, defensively, they weren't that bad in the 2 legs. Like, pretty much all of the goals from Barca were just individual bits of magic and brilliance, which Inter couldn't really do a whole lot about. And for the most part, there weren't really many times where Inter Milan was sitting in a low block and just got absolutely cut open, and it was clear-cut chance after chance. It was more like, for example, this first goal was just a Yamal wonder-strike dribble pass feed like the entire team. The Ferran Torres goal was just an incredible pass from Pedri. This was a long shot from Rafinha. And then even in the second leg, right, a lot of the goals they conceded were sort of just moments from Barcelona. Not that much. Inter got ripped up. I actually thought for the most part, besides Lamine Yamal, who, I mean, when he's on form, is just absolutely ridiculous, and you can't really stop him. Inter didn't get completely destroyed defensively. So it'll be interesting how they go with PSG, because PSG's attack is incredible as well, right? PSG's attack is kind of similar to Barca though, which is where they do have that individual quality. Players like Yamal and Rafinha. PSG have those in Doué, Dembele, Kvara, Barkla. These guys could potentially just have that individual bit of magic, a bit of brilliance, which hurt Inter against Barcelona, and it could hurt them too. Now, another factor which I think I'm going to mention briefly, but I don't think it's really a huge thing. It's a thing slightly, but not really, is experience. And this PSG side is very, very young. Then the oldest guy here might actually be Marquinhos, who's only 29, 30. That of course has not really been an issue for them this campaign. They've been absolutely amazing, and they've got past Arsenal and Liverpool and other teams. But it is a factor to consider that this is a really young team, and I actually think all of them besides Marquinhos, this is their first ever Champions League final they will be playing in. For a lot of them in general, this is the first major final of their careers. Players like Pacho, Kavicha, Doué, Joao Neves, Vitinha, maybe Hakimi as well. Like, this is the first major final of their entire careers, so maybe there's gonna be some nerves there, right? And you compare that to Inter, who this is a really experienced side, and I think actually Inter is the oldest team in the Champions League this season, like the average age, and importantly, this is basically the exact same side that got to the Champions League final 2 years ago against Manchester City. Pretty much barring, I think, Thuram and Sommer. I think everyone else in this team was there, which is vital, which is a really good experience to have. When you compare that to PSG, who don't have that experience now, it's a factor, but I think the only sort of time experience comes into play is if, for example, PSG go a goal down in this final. That's maybe where experience comes into play, because if you go a goal down and you're the less experienced side in a cup final, maybe there's a little bit more doubt, maybe there's a little bit more nerves, a bit more panic in your younger players who have never been on that stage before. And then Inter as well, maybe there's a little less nerves in terms of seeing out the game if they go a goal up. But I actually don't think experience is a huge factor. I just think it's something which could play a thing, but it's not that big a deal, because I mean, we've seen this season, right? Teams like Crystal Palace against Manchester City, teams like Newcastle versus Liverpool, teams like Spurs versus United. These teams were inexperienced compared to their competitors, and they won the game. So it's not like a huge thing. What maybe is a bit more of a huge thing, I actually feel, is this Inter Milan side have overcome a great deal of adversity this season and in the Champions League, and they, I think, could be a little bit more battle tested in terms of their mentality. You see, Inter Milan had a grueling tie against Barcelona, and they looked completely down and out. They had 3 minutes left to save themselves, and they looked completely down and out, yet they managed to claw themselves back in the game and then win it in extra time. That showed a great deal of mentality to get past that sort of period of adversity and battle through it. And even in their other games against Bayern Munich as well, they had a bit of adversity in the second leg, right? They were under pressure from Bayern Munich, who were pushing for a late goal to win it, yet they managed to hold on, they managed to see out the tie. I do think Inter Milan, and also actually in the first leg too, they were pegged back 1-1 late on an 85th minute, yet they kept going until the final whistle and managed to get a winner in the 88th minutes. So I think Inter Milan have shown a great deal of grit and heart and determination and mentality that even when they look down and out, this Inter team will continue to fight. And where I think that will be advantage is, I don't know if PSG have shown that yet this season. Against Liverpool, okay, yeah, they lost the first leg. They won the second leg, okay, cool. difficult, but I wouldn't say that was like, they had to show incredible grit and determination. And then against Villa, this was maybe where they showed a bit of fragility in terms of they were 2-0 up, they bottled it and 3-2, and let's be real, if it wasn't for insane Donnarumma saves, they probably would have gone out. And it looked like a period where they were going to crumble. Now they did overcome that and managed to weather the storm, but I wouldn't say it was the most convincing way and convincing manner. And then against Arsenal it was fairly comfortable over both legs. So that's just one thing I would say for this final, that PSG are the less experienced side, and I think PSG haven't had to show as much grit and fight and haven't shown that they have this elite mentality to never give up and never crumble. So yeah, I think PSG, that's something which maybe could play a factor. I think maybe if they go a goal down, Inter Milan could test their mentality, and let's see if they can go with that PSG. That being said, Inter Milan have been really bad at holding leads this season, in Serie A and in the Champions League too, right? Like against Bayern Munich, they took the lead twice and twice gave it away. Or actually not twice, but they took the lead in the 61st minute and then blew it. Against Barcelona in the first leg, they were 2-0 up and they blew it. And then they went 3-1 up and then they blew it. In the second leg, they went 2-0 up again and they blew it. And then they, eventually held out in the end, but Inter Milan have been poor at holding out leads, seeing out the games. That could play a factor, although, to be honest, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal, because in finals, sort of 1 or 2 goals will win the game, so I'll be shocked if like Inter took a 2-goal lead and managed to throw that away in a final, right? But it's just something to note. Now, tactically, I will say Inter Milan could potentially really hurt PSG defensively, because PSG, if there is a weakness in their side, there's not many, it is probably the defence. If you look at all of their games, okay, Liverpool was probably the tie where they showed, they weren't really that troubled defensively, but against Aston Villa, I mean, they conceded 4 goals over 2 legs against a pretty mediocre Villa side, and as I mentioned, if it wasn't for Donnarumma, it could have been a lot more actually. Against Arsenal, they did pretty well defensively, but I mean, there were some serious spells, right, where at the start of that second leg, Arsenal put PSG under pressure and Donnarumma had to bail them out. And there were some spells in that first leg too, in the first half, where Donnarumma had to bail them out again. And numerous times this season, in the Champions League, Donnarumma has made some incredible saves to keep them in the game. Now he could well do that again in this game, but there clearly then is some defensive fragility for PSG at the back, which Inter Milan could potentially expose. And I will say, I think a lot of it is sort of like height and crosses into the box. Donnarumma does well to deal with it, but Marquinhos, Pacho, these guys aren't giants in the air. They're not incredibly great at dealing with crosses into the box. And Hakimi and Mendes, particularly Hakimi down the right hand side, you can get past him. So yeah, I think defensively PSG are really gonna have to improve in this final and gonna have to be rock solid, because they've shown a bit of fragility there throughout the Champions League this season, which maybe Inter could expose. That being said, PSG, their attack is just so good that they can easily outscore any opposition. Now, if we talk about the key matchups where this game could be won or lost, I think for me the biggest most important weapons are the fullbacks. He didn't play this game. Let me get up. Actually, I'll get the Barca game up. But Dumfries and DeMarco have been so good, and they are really where the attacks for Inter come from. And we saw just how effective they can be against Barcelona, with Dumfries getting 5 goals and assists in just 2 legs. We saw the best of Dumfries, where at points he's the highest player up the field. So that is really the 2 best sort of attacking creative outlets for Inter Milan. How are PSG going to deal with that is going to be interesting, because I mentioned Hakimi defensively is solid, but it's not like he is some rock at the back. He's not like Philip Lahm at the back. He can be exposed for sure. And with the wing backs of Inter pushing forward, is he going to be able to deal with that? Now Mendes, on the other hand, has been really good defensively. He was incredible versus Salah. He did pretty decent versus Saka too. But how's he going to do up against Dumfries, who we saw against Barcelona just how great he can be? That being said, PSG's fullbacks are also incredible going forward, so this is something where the Inter Milan wingbacks need to deal with, as Mendes and Hakimi have shown that going forward they can be a real problem. Hakimi scored in the Arsenal second leg. Both Hakimi and Mendes scored in the Villa second leg, and Mendes scored in the first leg too. So both of these cause problems going forward as well. And kind of like Hakimi, DeMarco and Dumfries aren't really known for their defensive output. They're more known for their attacking. And we actually did see DeMarco kind of get absolutely cooked, to be honest, against Lamine Yamal. So he's going to have to deal with Hakimi and Doué down the right hand side, or Dembele if he drifts out there too. So yeah, he's going to have both of them to deal with. Is DeMarco going to be able to? He's going to have Mkhitaryan and Bastoni there to help, but we'll see. But I think those fullback areas are going to be really, really big. And the wingers as well. For PSG is really where I think this game is going to be won and lost, because pretty much PSG, the reason they are in the Champions League final is because of their attack. Their attack is just so good. Kavicha, Doué, Barcola and Dembele, just so fluid, just so good, and so good in these sort of 1v1 situations where they can just be a man and bend it into the top right corner, right? They've done it time and time again. Can they do it against Inter? And I mentioned Inter pretty good defensively, right? But they couldn't deal with Lamine Yamal. They couldn't deal with him over both legs. They couldn't deal with a tricky, fast winger running at them and creating chaos. And DeMarco, Bastoni, Mkhitaryan could not deal with him. All 3 of them couldn't deal with him. Dumfries and Bissek and Barella did deal with Rafinha fairly well, but they're up against Kvara, they're up against Doué, they're up against Dembele. How are Inter going to deal with them is going to be crucial. If they can manage to lock down Kavicha, if they can manage to keep Doué, Dembele quiet, Inter are going to have a great chance of lifting that trophy. But it's easier said than done, because these guys are electric. Also though, on the other hand, PSG's defence needs to be tight, because a key matchup for me is how are PSG going to deal with the front 2 of Marcus Thuram and Lautaro Martinez. See, I was thinking about this, and Pacho and Marquinhos have formed a fantastic partnership this season. For the most part, they have both been absolutely fantastic and rocks at the back. But in the Champions League, they haven't actually really faced a proper amazing striker, right? Obviously, Arsenal, they're coming up against Miguel Merino, Leandro Trossard. Against Villa, they're coming up against Ollie Watkins, who is decent, but he's not like world class or anything. Liverpool, they don't really have like an out and out striker. This is their first proper test. Marcus Thuram and Lautaro Martinez are two serious strikers. And how are Pacho and Marquinhos going to deal with it? Particularly Marquinhos, because we all know this guy, he has the bozo gene. He can be prone to a big error in a big moment. Hell, he's even done it already this season. He did it in the semi-final. He was at fault for the Saka goal, which, I mean, Saka had a chance later on after that. Could have completely cost PSG the tie. They cannot afford any bozo moments from him. They cannot afford him to mess up in this final. They need him to be a leader. They need him to be the captain and step up. But he's got a really tough task up against Lautaro and Thuram, who are probably the best strike partnership in world football right now. They caused Barca's centre-backs all sorts of problems. They're running, they're pressing, they're dribbling, their hold-up play. It's a nuisance for all centre-backs, so that's going to be massive. That matchup, and Lautaro Martinez, to be fair, kind of the same thing with Marquinhos. He's the captain of this team like Marquinhos, but has sort of been questioned in these big games, in these finals, in these big moments. Can he do it? And this is a bit of a redemption story for him, because in the last Champions League final, he really was poor and he had some good chances, but he didn't take them. This is his moment now as captain to step up and prove himself in this big game, and they're gonna need him to. He stepped up, and him and Thuram stepped up in the semi-final, but they need to step up in the final if Inter have a chance of winning this. So, another key matchup, or well, key players, because they're not going to be matching up, but it's Jan Sommer and Gianluigi Donnarumma. I can't not talk about these two because they have been the two best goalkeepers in the Champions League this season. If it wasn't for Donnarumma, if it wasn't for Jan Sommer, Inter and PSG would both not be in the Champions League final. Both have pulled off some absolutely incredible, heroic saves to get them here. In the semi-final in particular, Jan Sommer was absolutely sensational and pulled off some crazy saves to keep Inter in the game. And Gianluigi Donnarumma, same thing against Arsenal, crazy saves, but also crazy saves versus Villa. Hero in the penalty shootout versus Liverpool. That's maybe another factor that if it goes to penalties, maybe PSG have the edge here with Donnarumma, although Sommer is very good at penalty saving too. But both keepers have been in top form, and let's see if both of them can maintain it in the final, or I think both will be called into action at some point in this final. Let's see if both of them can continue to pull off heroics in the final. Now, that's pretty much most of what I have to say. I mean, I'll say a couple things as well. General points that, if PSG win, this would really be a bad look on Kylian Mbappe, wouldn't it? The year he leaves, they win the Champions League, but if they win, Ousmane Dembele, by the way, maybe the Ballon d'Or could be on. If he scores in the final, he has a really good game and they win, hey, maybe he's gonna win that Ballon d'Or, right? this could potentially be the start of a dynasty for PSG. They could potentially be the next kings of Europe, because they are such a young squad, right? They can keep growing and developing and maybe dominate, but they need to win this first. Meanwhile, for Inter, this is sort of going to be, this is it, right? This is the end of an era. This is an old team. This is their second chance at getting silverware, second chance at getting the big prize. They failed against Man City. It's the chance for redemption this time. And an interesting thing is, Inzaghi's job has actually sort of come under threat. Well, not like under threat, like he's going to get sacked, but as you see here, he has been linked with a move to Saudi potentially. So this is going to be interesting, where a couple different scenarios could happen here. If Inter win, maybe he says, hey look, I've taken us as far as I can go. I've won the trophy. I have lifted the biggest title possible. I've made us kings of Europe once again. I've achieved everything I can. I'm gonna go get the bag, and it'll be a great way to sign off his Inter career. However, if he loses, maybe he could say, actually, you know what? I need to prove myself. I need to go ahead and get that Champions League title, because I can't leave on a sour note. I can't leave actually trophyless. It would be this season if he loses this, and maybe he stays. That's an interesting thing. And also, PSG, by the way, they win this, they will join the exclusive club of treble winners, so that's something else. Anyways, it's time. My final score prediction. How do I see this game going? Honestly, could go either way, but I think it's going to start off quite tight. I do think it's going to be quite tight. I don't think it's going to be a little bit cagey. I think PSG will be the team with most of the ball. Naturally, I think Inter will be setting off for most of the game, trying to hit PSG on a counter-attack. But I think PSG will be cautious of that, so they're not going to go too gun-ho. Which is why I think it'll be tight, it'll be cagey. I think it'll be 0-0 for probably the first half, actually. But I think PSG's attack is too good for Inter to hold out and shut them out. So I actually think PSG eventually will score first and take a lead. That will force Inter to push forward, and I do think though that if Inter push forward and put PSG under siege, I've seen enough cracks in PSG's defence to say they will fold. So I think Inter will push forward and get the goal to equalise it. I actually think we'll go to extra time. I think it'll end 1-1, and in extra time, they prove they can win in extra time before. I'm gonna say Inter do it. I'm gonna say it ends 2-1 Inter after extra time. Yeah, that's just my prediction. I just don't think PSG's defence is good enough. I think Inter's attack will cause them a lot of problems, but as I said, I can honestly see it going either way. I'm excited for the final. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you guys have enjoyed this video,